What's up guys, Jonah Mathis here. So on December 8th, 2020, Sonos added the ability for you to add an additional sub to a Sonos home theater system. This feature came in version 12.2.2 of the Sonos S2 application. Now this is a feature that users have been requesting for quite a while now, so it's awesome to see that Sonos is listening to their customers and has finally added this option. There are a couple of caveats though. First is that one of the two subs must be a Gen 3 sub. So you could use a Gen 3 sub and a Gen 2 sub, or a Gen 3 sub and a Gen 1 sub, or even two Gen 3 subs like I am. And the dual subs can only be paired with one of the Sonos soundbars, so the Arc, Beam, Playbar, Playbase, or the Sonos amp. So now with a Sonos Arc, two subs, and two surround speakers, this creates a 5.2.2 surround sound system. While a single sub was already very impressive, a dual sub setup is even more impressive. I've been a big fan of my Sonos system for quite a while now, and I'm super excited to add an additional sub to see how much better it can get. But first, let's talk about how this is actually set up. So the setup is really complicated. To add the second sub, you need to run a very long Ethernet cable from the first sub to the second sub and keep it connected at all times. No, I'm joking, of course. This is Sonos we're talking about, and the setup is super easy. If you appreciate a little bit of humor, then I'd appreciate it if you'd smash that like button really quick. Now, all you really have to do is connect the second sub to power and open up the Sonos app. Once you open up the app, it should recognize the new sub and prompt you to start setting it up. Going through this will simply add it to the network, and then it can be added to your existing system, which in my case is a Sonos Arc, Gen 3 sub, and two Sonos One SLs. Usually, when a new device is added to a Sonos system, it will prompt you to run TruePlay tuning calibration. It's very important that you run TruePlay for a dual sub setup. I've talked about TruePlay a lot in the past, but to put it simply, it's Sonos's audio calibration software. When you go through this process, it uses your phone's microphone to listen to the audio that your system is producing. It does this while you're sitting in the main seating area, as well as while you're walking around the room. It basically listens for any inconsistent frequencies in the system, where maybe the low end is a little too loud and not very clear, or the high end frequencies are too tinny and harsh on the ears. Then it actively adjusts these to make it sound better for your specific room. This is useful because everyone's room setup is different. Audio is greatly affected by the size, shape, and objects inside of a room. Now, I do want to mention that you must use an Apple iOS device to run TruePlay tuning. If you're using an Android phone, then I'd suggest that you simply borrow a friend's iPhone to run the TruePlay tuning process, then you're good to go. So, TruePlay is important because two Sonos subs in a single room is going to output a ridiculous amount of bass, like usually way more than one room should realistically have. TruePlay will help balance and level the bass out so that it's not ridiculously boomy or overly punchy. It's supposed to adjust the audio to a good level of punchiness while also improving the overall clarity of the low-end frequencies. If there's too much punch behind subwoofers in a room, it can be really difficult for you to actually understand the sound that they're producing. And again, this greatly varies depending on the room that you're in. In my living room with one sub, it was fairly easy to locate where the bass was coming from. Now that's not necessarily bad, but it doesn't provide a very full feeling to the room. For us, it was easy to tell that it was coming from the left rear, but it still provided plenty of bass for our liking. Now when I added the second sub, the bass got ridiculous, very boomy and loud. But after running TruePlay, it very much evened everything out. It fills the entire room with bass rather than just a general area. And the bass is super clear, by the way. It's in no way muffled or hard to understand like many other wireless subwoofers out there. After running TruePlay, you can also adjust the sub levels. So I would tinker with this to see if you can get it to sound exactly like you want it to. Positioning two Sonos subs in a room can be slightly difficult depending on the layout and configuration of that room. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time talking about this because someone else has already made a very in-depth video about it. Check out Peter P's video if you want an extremely in-depth explanation on this, but here are the things that I've learned from him and in my own testing. Number one, if possible, try to keep both subs on the same side of the room. So either both subs in the front of the room or both subs in the back of the room, not to the left or right. I opted for both subs to be in the back of the room, as it works better for us practically. 2. If you can't place both subs in the front or back of the room, then place them diagonally. So one in the front left and the other in the rear right, or vice versa. If you place both subs on the right or left sides of your room, then it's very possible they could start canceling each other out. We want the bass to merge together and fill the room, not hit each other and cancel out. 3. Place the subs closer to a wall if possible and make sure one of the openings is facing the wall. If you look at a Sonos sub, the audio is projected out both sides of the middle opening. So if you want to place one side close to the wall, it will bounce the audio off of the wall to provide a much better bass response than if it was firing into the open air. Lower audio frequencies, aka bass, is very prone to bounce off of walls. It does not get absorbed as easily as higher frequencies. So there's this healthy balance where we want the bass to bounce around the room and fill the space with deep and rich low-end frequencies, but you don't want it to bounce around too much because it will start to degrade the audio experience. There's definitely some testing that you can do here to find the perfect positioning for the two subs. I would rewatch a loud action scene from one of your favorite movies and adjust the position of the subs slightly to hear the differences that it makes. Keep adjusting them until you find positions that sound good to you and are ideal locations for the subs to be permanently located. Quality of two Sonos subs compared to just a single sub is pretty substantial. See what I did there? But really, when watching Avengers Endgame with Dolby True HD audio, the overall bass for the room is just outstanding. There's lots of rumble with large explosions, but you can still clearly hear the very low-end audio. It's not just rumble and shaking like a lot of other wireless subwoofers. Thunder, lightning, explosions, and things like that almost sound real in my opinion. It's very close to what I would call a traditional home theater experience. I've praised the Sonos Arc surround system in many of my videos, and adding this second sub just makes me love this system even more. Now, I will say that the difference with music doesn't seem to be as drastic as it is for movies. There's definitely a big difference between one sub and two subs, but if your main use is listening to music, I just wouldn't go for it. Although it may entirely depend on the source of that music. Personally, I listen to just about everything on Spotify, but Spotify also isn't the most high fidelity audio listening experience. With a higher quality source like Tidal or a lossless audio source, I believe the difference is going to be much greater. Let's go over the main reasons why you should or should not get a second Sonos sub. Number 1, the first thing you want to ask yourself is, can you fit this second sub in an optimal position in your room? Keep in mind what I said about subwoofer positioning earlier. This is very important. Try changing the position of your current sub to see if you can get a better bass response in your room. You might be surprised by how much a bad placement can negatively affect the low end in your room. 2, if you can correctly place them in your room, the next thing you should consider is my room actually big enough to accommodate the sound of two Sonos subs? A smaller room like my office, which is 13 feet by 11 feet with a 9-foot ceiling, does not accommodate two Sonos subs very well. I had to be careful not to turn the volume up too loud because I was afraid my neighbors were going to kick my door down. There's truly that much power to it. In a smaller room, the bass just bounces around the room like crazy and just doesn't sound as good as you might expect. The performance is subpar in a smaller room like this. In a much larger room like my living room, they sound absolutely amazing and don't overpower the room in any way whatsoever. They fill the entire room with rich and clean bass while also providing the perfect amount of rumble. 3, if your entertainment room shares a wall with a neighbor, I'd be cautious about getting a second sub, unless you don't like your neighbors or care what they think. The amount of rumble and overall sound that they produce can easily be heard by a close neighbor, so please be mindful of this. 4, if you don't have a Sonos Arc yet, then I really wouldn't go for a second sub. If you're rocking a Sonos Beam, Playbar, or Playbase, then I'd highly recommend that you upgrade to the Arc first, then at a later point add in the second sub. 5, if you don't have surround speakers yet, invest in those prior to getting a second sub. There are various options here that are much cheaper than a new sub, and I think surround speakers will drastically improve the audio experience more than adding a second sub will. Now, you could keep it simple with just two Sonos One SLs, or you could build a ridiculous Mac Daddy system with two Sonos 5s. Hint, hint, subscribe if you aren't already. Future video on that coming soon. So if you do decide to go with adding an additional sub, my biggest suggestion is that you see if you can buy a used or open box unit. This will save you a decent chunk of change for almost no real downside. Of course, make sure you're getting it from a reputable source though. Purchasing a new Gen 3 Sonos sub is gonna run you about $700 US, or you can find an open box unit for as low as $530. So do a little bit of research prior to making your purchase, as you could save yourself a decent amount of money. And with all that said, what are your thoughts on adding a second Sonos sub? Do you think it's awesome, ridiculous, overly expensive? Let me know in the comments down below. If you haven't already, make sure you click that like button and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.